Hi, and welcome to Chapter 23 of the Routledge Handbook of Research Methods for Socio-Ecological Systems. And in this chapter, we'll be looking at network analysis. So one might wonder, what is network analysis? Well, it refers to the techniques that illustrate relationships among social and ecological entities to analyze the patterns that emerge from recurrence and strength of these relations. The basic assumption is that better explanations of phenomena are yielded by analysis of the relations within and among social and ecological systems. For instance, network analysis can help us understand how the interaction among different social groups can influence the health and integrity of nature. If we look at the image on the right, we can see how corporations, farmers, and even the civil society are interacting among themselves and with different dimensions of nature. Firstly, network analysis was narrowly applied in either purely social or ecological systems. For instance, in social sciences, network analysis was applied to represent friendship ties or collaborations, while in environmental sciences, it has been used to represent food webs, landscape connectivity, and wildfire transmission. More recently, researchers have more widely used network analysis to study socio-ecological systems. For instance, some studies used network analysis to model the management and governance of common pool resources. It has also been used to show if regulations and policies align with ecological issues and contexts. Network analysis comes with a wide range of advantages, but more importantly, it thrives in understanding the general patterns of connectivity. It allows identification of existing relationships within a network while also portraying the strength of the relations between different nodes. Complex connections that would have been otherwise difficult to map become more simplified using network analysis.
Before talking about network analysis, we need to understand the main components of a graph. A graph is a network of nodes connected by edges. You can see here some examples of nodes and edges in social ecological systems. We can see on the right-hand side a social ecological network. In yellow, you can see the connections between people. These connections can represent social relationships from friendship to cooperation or competition. Then, in green color, we have the connections between ecological nodes. And these connections can represent the connectivity between different forest patches that allow the movement of animals or seeds. Finally, the blue edges represent the relation between people and nature, and this can be a relation of stewardship, management, or extraction of natural resources. As you can see, the language of graph theory provides you with great flexibility to represent complex social and ecological systems. There are different types of graphs. Depending on the research question that you want to pursue and the nature of the social ecological system that you want to model, you can use different types of graphs. Let's review some examples. On the most left-hand side, you can see an example of a directed weighted network. Let's assume that this graph represents the spreading of a disease in an agricultural landscape. We can infer that the larger the node is, the most affected a farm or a field is by the disease. Also, we can infer that the weight of the arrow shows how much of this disease was transmitted from one node to another node. For example, if we look at the blue node, we can see that this node transmitted the disease to other three nodes, but it transmitted a greater amount of disease to the green node. Multilayer networks are other example of graphs. In the second picture, you can see a network composed by two layers. One layer containing a yellow graph and the other layer containing a green graph. In this case, each node represents a municipality in the map display in the layer. Let's assume that the yellow graph represents cooperation between different municipalities. On the other hand, let's imagine that the green graph represents connectivity between forest patches. Ideally, the connections existing in the yellow graph should reproduce the connections in the green graph. In other words, if two municipalities share a forest reserve, you will expect that there is some kind of social or political coordination between them to conserve and manage the forest. Finally, on the right-hand side, you can see an illustration of a bipartite network. This graph shows edges that run between nodes of different kinds. For instance, it can be used to show affiliation or membership to groups or classes. Let's imagine that the yellow nodes represent a species and that the blue nodes represent habitats. We can infer that habitat 1 hosts only one species A. On the other hand, species B, C, D, E, and F share habitat 3.
Now we just want to introduce some key terms in network analysis theory to make you familiar with them. Degree centrality is defined as the number of edges that a node has, and degree distribution is the probability distribution of these degrees over the whole network. Community detection is a method for finding clusters of similar groups within a large network, and network motifs are the recurring significant patterns of interconnections in the network. Random graph models are applied to discover the existence of certain graph properties and graph behavior, like how networks grow over time. And network inference aim is to infer the network topology from given data, often from missing or incomplete data. And then, if the network topology changes over time, and so the nodes or edges may come and go or change their weight, it would be a relevant problem for the network-based analysis of time series. The network-based analysis of time series can also be applied to high-dimensional data to analyze nonlinear dynamics in the form of discrete networks. Let me illustrate some of the concepts with a few practical examples. On the left-hand side, you see a group of people that have some social connections. They could be friends or colleagues or people attending a conference on socio-ecological approaches in systems thinking, who knows? And then one of the first interesting metrics for measuring the social connection within the group would be a degree centrality, which is the number of social connections that every person has. And then probably the smiley face just in the middle of the network that has the most connecting edges. It could be a grandfather or grandmother or company's CEO or another person with an important social role. Let's now look at these two graphs. They both have the same number of nodes, but the nodes are connected differently. More specifically, the graph at the top, a scale-free graph, has a yellow node that has more edges than any other node in the network. Contrarily, if we look at the bottom graph, all nodes have the same number of edges on average. Two graphs have different network degree distribution. The network degree distribution shapes the network structure, and it is quite oftenly important for the stability of the system. The next concept example that we put here is the community detection problem, which aims to cluster nodes into groups based on the graph structure. There are many different methods and computer algorithms to accomplish that, and the most popular family of algorithms detect community based on the network modularity. Modularity measures the density of connections within a module or community. In this example, the density of connections within the blue node sector differs from the modularity of the green node sector, and so these two form distant communities. Another interesting concept is the motif detection problem. The problem of finding repeating patterns in data is called pattern recognition, and when it comes to finding repeating patterns in relational data, a network motif is defined as a unique and frequent subgraph in the network. In the example of socio-ecological network with the communities of people and forest patches, the most recurrent motif is a three-node fully connected graph where all nodes are connected to each other. There are numerous packages or tools that are available for network analysis. For those of you with little or no experience in script programming, we recommend using one of the tools with a graphical interface, such as Usenet. It is a proprietary software that is available for Windows users with a free trial period of 60 days. It is also possible to run Usenet on Mac using Wine. The most popular open source packages are iGraph and StatNet in R and NetworkX in Python, which require a bit of experience in coding, but also include very well maintained documentation and code snippets. So if you are not a programmer, there is a less of potential barrier to overcome. To conclude, network analysis is a truly powerful method to study how relationships between data points in your data influence the system structure and function, including, of course, socio-ecological systems. It could be used for identifying general patterns of connectivity, but also for much more advanced problems such as modeling and analysis of complex adaptive systems. The important thing is to keep in mind is that socio-ecological systems are also open systems, which means that they have interactions with other outer systems. And usually the choice of the boundaries of the network is arbitrary, which of course has important implications on the network structure. And with that in mind, we want to thank you for listening to our chapter overview. We hope you could find it helpful. Here we list some references with example of studies where the network analysis method is applied to solving problems in socio-ecological studies. And we also provide some documentation for network analysis tools and packages that we suggest using. Thanks a lot for your attention and good luck.